You were here with By the Cover. Today I'll be reviewing Alien's Harvest by Robert Sheckly. This book was 326 pages and took me 2 days to read. I would rate this a 4 out of 10. This review is going to contain major spoilers. If you have not read this book, do not watch this. Click off now. The synopsis: a sci-fi adventure where scientist Stannis Law and thief Julie hijack a spaceship to harvest royal jelly from a dangerous alien hive. Seeking profit, they lead a misfit crew to a perilous planet to steal a potent drug, facing deadly creatures and desperate battles. As far as my likes with the book, I loved the mention of Xenozip and the continuation of that plot line from Genocide, which is the previous book in the series. Julie's fight with Khalil and his bodyguards was great. I found both Badger and Norbert as interesting characters, and I like that the book explores boundaries between the synthetics and humanity, which has been done in previous books. As far as my dislikes, the book touts on the cover that you're going to return to the alien homeworld, which you do not. This is a completely different planet. The beginning of the book, which is the portion where they're trying to get the funding to go on their expedition, was very boring. One of the biggest issues I have with this book is that the aliens were not written very threatening. I mean, you're talking about an 8 or 9 out of 10 antagonist right off the bat with the aliens, and I would rate them probably a 2 in this book. They're barely a nuisance. They're like mosquitoes. Somehow the author took one of the best antagonists ever and turned them into a nothing burger. Good job. The book could have used some better editing. There's a portion of the book where the crew takes a lander down to AR-32, which is the alien planet that they're at, and this event happens 2 times in the book, which is a mistake. Some other big issues I have with this book: the character work is very, very messy. The primary character, Stan, is a rich scientist who seems to be more interested in robotics than human interactions. He spends the majority of the book just tripping balls on Xenozip to keep the pain of dying from cancer away. He's not really a sympathetic character, and he also has no character arc. Julie was the most interesting character, being a master thief. She was building up to be a pretty good character towards the start of the book, but then after the Norbert training sequence, she doesn't play a large role in the rest of the book. It felt like her character was sidelined way too early, and thus was wasted potential of at least one relatable character. Captain Hoban wasn't a compelling character. He was set up for a great redemption arc, but overall I didn't feel like he really redeemed himself in any way. He wasn't a great captain, and like Julie, his character was sidelined too early in the book. He actually doesn't even go down to the planet with his crew, he just stays on the ship. Badger, who was one of the prisoners that was brought along on this mission, he was at least an interesting character, but he had no character arc. He made some really dumb decisions. He ends up killing one of his friends that joined his side of a rebellion they eventually go on. And after he does this, he's like, it happens. He wasn't likable, and he had no arc. And ultimately, he was just there to split the crew up and cause chaos. The plot was an absolute mess in this book. It started out as almost an exact rehash of Alien's Genocide. It's almost as though this book and that book were being written at the same time, but Genocide came out first, and so this author had to quickly figure out something else to do with the story. Around the 40% mark, I think, is where the events take a drastically different turn from Genocide. The initial quest was to steal royal jelly from a floating abandoned ship in space, but upon arrival the rich scientist paying for the expedition immediately abandons this plan and decides to just go down to the alien planet to get it. I don't know about you, but getting it from an abandoned ship seems far safer than going down to an alien planet with a super hive to get it. It's later discovered that a biofirm was already on the planet harvesting royal jelly and ended up blowing the ship up that the crew was going to raid. This doesn't really make sense though, because that ship was packed full of royal jelly, which is what the biofirm is after. So why would they blow it up in the first place? Secondly, if the biofirm was aware of their competition on the planet, Why wouldn't they have just got the royal jelly before their competitors took it up to the ship? As I already mentioned, the captain doesn't go with his crew to the alien planet, which makes no sense. Badger eventually leads a mutiny against Captain Hoban, and he ends up killing members of Hoban's crew, yet Captain Hoban lets Badger live multiple times. The prison convicts form some kind of union and start wanting and asking and demanding things like double pay. One of them wants to pay off their house. What kind of prisoners do you know still need to pay off their house? Once the rebellion starts, Badger decides the safest place for them is camping out on an alien superhive. Badger ends up being captured by Biofirm's Captain Potter of the Lancet. Gil is a synthetic on the crew who was sent over by Stan to blow up the Lancet, basically self-destruct, after being let into the Lancet, and he does this. The key takeaway there is Badger was captured aboard the Lancet. Gil exploded on the Lancet. Therefore, Badger should have been dead. But in the epilogue of the story, Badger has somehow miraculously made it back to Earth. And he visits Captain Hoban. And they have a conversation, a nice one. Badger led a mutiny against Captain Hoban. The entire plot makes no sense. So overall, I think this is the lowest point in the Aliens franchise up to this point. This is the 5th book. It was still a little bit enjoyable, but it was so messy and illogical that I really just couldn't fully get into this one. So that's about it. We'll catch you later.